Well, the starting point for this is the fact that the South Africans are not happy with the fact that this is out in the public. They said there's been some misreporting of what it is. There is a binational commission meeting that was scheduled as far back as 2024 that the way it has been communicated is wrong, that there was an agreement to defer the meeting. Do they have a concern that this shouldn't be out in the public domain in the manner in which it is?
Good morning to you. And for the record, please keep Dr. Mireku, Dr. Ulanaya Mireku seems to be a mouthful. So please keep Dr. Mireku in your record, if that's okay with you. Going forward, I think that it's neither here nor there. I think that it's a very unfortunate statement. Or if they are not happy about the fact that it's out there in the public domain, I don't know whether they're interested in than really getting to the bottom of the issue. Are they interested in managing the blowback from the fact that this is out there? Or they are really interested in dealing with the situation at hand in that country, which is the fact that other African nations are in distress, shops have been closed, people have been taken with machetes, people have lost lives in that country over these attacks. Are they interested in managing? Are they interested in the material that this statement brings to them more than what is happening in the country? I think it's neither here nor there. They must understand it's a moral duty to want to visit Ghana at this particular moment when diplomatic and political, the atmosphere is very tense. I mean, they should know better. That this is not even if so for me the problem is not who call for the end of this bilateral visit. My problem is not who called for it. The problem is the political the implication that is this is political statement just to tell you that this is not the right time. Look, this is one of the few times where public sentiment aligns with foreign policy. Usually we say that state and unity actors whose foreign policy decision making are independent of public sentiment. But you can clearly agree with me. You and I would agree that Ghanaians are not particularly happy about the way the South African government has dealt with this issue. And we are seeking to register our resentment or dissatisfaction in any serious, intensified manner that we can. And if you look at the message that Ghana has put in place, it has escalated the diplomatic avenues or channels one after the other. And the South African government needs to have known this. I mean, look, this is South Africa. We expect, look, I've always said that I think there is even a problem with the South African PR, either the Ministry of Foreign Relations or the Ministry of Communications. Because if you see the kind of statement they release in the aftermath of these barbaric, hooliganic activities by these xenophobic attackers, the statements, in my opinion, are not tempest calming. They don't talk. I think that they have been very pompous in response. I think that the statements by the foreign relations, the foreign ministry of South Africa, in my opinion, has been very counterproductive to the image that they are seeking to project. And so if these things are out in the public domain, how should it be a bother to them than dealing with the bad publicity and diplomatic embarrassment that these xenophobic attackers are giving South Africa? To me, it's neither here nor there. I think that some better analysis and some better responses must come from the South African government than what they are trying to do at the moment.
What would have been what is the challenge if Ghana agrees to host a South African president at this time?
Look, as we talk now, a Ghanaian has been killed in South Africa. The South African government is trying to dissociate itself, to distance itself, by saying that what happened to the Ghanaian is not related to the march on March. But the government has not provided clear evidence. And I have said that it even inures to the diplomatic and political capital of South Africa to have really strongly come out in providing evidential responses to these allegations leveled against the South African people or the March and March protest. right, than to try to provide symptomatic responses, mild, moderate responses to what is happening. I think that it was in their interest in the first instance to have done a good job at managing these incidents than what they have done. It doesn't really sit well. So Ghana is expecting some. Look, I can enumerate a number of events that doesn't make it very well. It charges the political atmosphere for the president to be here at this moment. The fact that our people were in distress, the fact that their lives were under threat, and we have to we have to get them out of the country. Almost thousands of them out of the country. And then what will break the camels back is the death of the Ghanaian. I think that every government with its sort. Look, if the shoe was on the other foot, and South Africans found themselves threatened or losing their lives in some other country, South Africans would be on the neck of Cyril Ramaphosa to demand the same thing Ghana is demanding from them, from that particular government. We haven't moved past the incident that has happened in South Africa concerning compensatory packages, concerning evidential response of what happened to the Ghanaian who lost his life in that country. And you are coming here at this particular charge moment. Even if it were coming from the South Africans, then it would also mean that they are not really giving the issue the kind of seriousness that it deserves. It only makes to me political sense that let matters come, let issues stall, and then eventually, if they in future, if you can postpone this meeting and have it done, because you see, like I said, public sentiment aligns with Ghana's foreign policy decision making as of now, right? The people are behind the government. I mean, people are very look, and it's not only Ghana. I've heard a lot of Nigerians who are saying they are very happy with the way the Ghanaian government is dealing with the issue, albeit diplomatic means, which is what I subscribe to. And this is one of the diplomatic political statements that, if it came from us, we could have registered. So there is the time is not right. I think that there are better ways and there are better times for these visits than this particular moment. And I should also put on record that diplomatic rows, diplomatic altercations, diplomatic disagreements is part of international politics, right? It's part of it greases the wheels of international relations. It does not mean that once there are diplomatic rows or there are diplomatic back and front, it doesn't mean that the relationship between Ghana, the bilateral relationship that exists between Ghana and South Africa, has gotten to the nadir of deterioration. I think that look, Ghana had the same back and forth, diplomatic back and forth with US, if you can remember, some few months ago. But where there is a need to collaborate, to cooperate over mutual necessities, we are able to put these differences aside. When matters have calmed down, we are able to put these differences aside and work towards productive commercial relations, which is what I think should happen. But there's a time for everything. And I think, in my opinion, this meeting, rightly so, whether it came from the Ghanaian government or from the South African government, I think that it needs to be undertaken at the right time.
Where have the South African authorities failed? Because if you listen carefully to Cyril Ramaphosa, he's also saying the constitution, like ours, guarantees a right to protest. So it would have been difficult to deny the people who wanted to protest the right to do so. Where do you think they failed in balancing what he said, the constitutional requirements, and ensuring that, like you said, no harm is done to any other citizen?
I have two things on this issue. You see, one is that you need to understand the psyche of South Africans. Look, South Africa is one of the countries of a history of activism. They are very passionate and particularly motivated when it comes to activism, when it comes to political activism and dealing with authorities because of the history of apartheid and how they put up, the resistance against the apartheid machinery. Except that they are channeling that energy, to the wrong, how do you call it, object. And so I understand their political activism, that is part of the making of modern South Africa. The other thing is that, be that as it may, and I have quoted Desmond Tutu on several sister stations or platforms. He said that Desmond Tutu, this is one of South Africa's own, right, who categorized South Africa as a rainbow nation. This is what he said, that in times of injustice, if you choose to stay neutral, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. I'm not saying that the South African government hasn't stated anything in response or hasn't done anything in response to condemning the xenophobic attack. That's what I'm saying. But the actions or the words of the South African government, to me, is tantamount or is equal as being neutral because it comes across as they are exploiting their situation. The government of South Africa is exploiting their situation to their advantage. It comes across as there is a dirty job that has to be done. But because they don't have the political will, they'd rather stay behind and let somebody do it for them. And that to me is the reason why the government is not fully in condemnation of what is happening and has not put in the adequate evidential measures that will communicate to everybody or every country whose national is affected that the government is really bent on cracking the brain of these xenophobic, attackers. That is my problem. I remember the Ramaphosa issued a statement saying that what is happening are criminals that are exploiting genuine grievances of South Africa and doing what they are doing. If that is the case, people must be put behind bars. Look, the leaders of the protest, the whoever their names are, recently, and I keep saying that in politics, the optics are important as the action. What kind of optics are you seeking to project to countries whose nationals have been maimed, have been killed, whose properties have been destroyed? By meeting with these protest people, the leaders of the protest, and seem to be merry-making. It is not for public consumption. So words are not enough. Look, I'll quote a very famous Relish International Relations expert to say this, and he says, "Words without a sword are about nothing, and of no words to protect the man." Right? The point I'm making is that for you to have just said these things without putting in measures that will make people really be convinced that you are dealing with an issue, and you want to visit countries whose nationals have been particularly affected at this particular time, no, it's not right. It's not. It's a moral absurdity. It only makes sense that when the political atmosphere is charged, let it become. Let us see some evidential responses. And that is one of the ways the government of Ghana registers its resentment. We don't want to go taking over South African businesses. We don't want to go driving South Africans away from Ghana. But the diplomatic avenues that we can use to register our resentment, we should explore it down to the wire. So if you ask me, this is my opinion. There are two ways to look at it, but whichever way you look at it, I think it's one of the ways that we can deal with this issue, escalating it to all the diplomatic levels that we can, without punishing ordinary South African businesses, South Africans here in Ghana, because we shouldn't go down that level. That caters with them. Ghana has a diplomatic, multilateral, pan-African agency to protect. We are a small state, but we've left that chart on the continent. There is no question about that. And so I think that we must stick to those diplomatic channels and register our resentment. And then when the time is right, we move beyond that and then forge that African unity that we've always known to lead.
Let me conclude by asking you, because this seems to be a continent-wide problem, especially most parts south of the Sahara. Because we've seen now some videos of people in Mozambique turning away South African nationals from their restaurants, among others. What needs to be the best response, considering this is, like I said, it's a continent-wide problem? And how soon should this be done so as not to avoid we seeing a repetition of what is happening in Mozambique in all the other countries that feel that their nationals are not being treated well in South Africa?
Once again, there are two ways to look at it. There's a saying that anytime you advise the mouse, anytime you advise the cat, you advise the mouse too. If you are saying this is a continent-wide problem, and what must be done about it, the other point is that, you see, Ghana has put up a very good optics. The media spectacle has been very good. We received those who came. I hear the government has been able to put some package together for them. But, are these sustainable measures? what are we doing back home here that provides, economic comfort zone for the youth? I'm not saying we shouldn't move out, but can we make our place livable, Ghana livable with jobs, so that the youth are able to be productive here than wanting to explore greener patches? Because you see, the grass is always greener at the other side until you get there. But so as a government, as a government of Ghana, I mean, it's a long term plan. But going forward, we need to put in place serious economic measures that keep our youth, finds them in productive, employment or engagement. So there is no lure to want to go to Russia, to want to go to Ukraine at the very throes of death, just because we want to make life, we want to make, ends meet. That said, I think that the same way the African continent united in fighting against the apartheid regime, I think that you must find some diplomatic channel to deal with this xenophobic sentiment. And I think that this is what I want to see the African Union being productive. We understand that the African Union is a supranational entity. We understand the African Union is an intergovernmental entity than a supranational entity. And so sometimes the sovereignty of states, always rise above the dictates of the African Union. But the African Union, be that as it may, has a mandate. This is where I'm expecting some political statements, even as lame as it can be. There should have been some political statements saying that the government, the African Union is concerned about development in South Africa, and it's probably any political, communication of a sort. But it's quiet. Until Ghana brought this issue before them that they will be discussing in Egypt, I hear in some few months, these things would have been kept quietly in the corridors of the African Union, and it shouldn't be so. And I think that at some point, some coalition of the willing, some African countries should be willing to exert some diplomatic pressure on the South African government to do something about it, than what is happening now. Because the collective, the impacts are no longer unilateral. The impact is now collective. It is not against one state, but we've seen so many African countries whose nationals have been affected. And if it continues this way, I think that the response must be coordinated, it must be collective, the same way African countries united in their fight against apartheid. You know, some of these measures must be taken against South Africa, albeit diplomatic, though, in my opinion. I don't think we need to go to the castles of trying to take over South African businesses, South African, firms driving away South Africans from Ghana. I beg to differ on that particular strategy. I think we shouldn't be seen as behaving as these people.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you very much for speaking to us. Dr. Mireku is an international relations expert speaking to us on the Gold Morning Conversation, taking us exactly 26 minutes past 9 here in the studios of Radio Gold 90.5 FM.
Officially, the number of Ghanaians in South Africa is pegged at 19,000. Okay. But all of us know that the figure is way bigger than that. Now, so far, the government of Ghana has repatriated 300 Ghanaians from South Africa. 300.
It's more than that.
Yeah. Okay, let's say 1,000. No problem. I'm not arguing with that. 1,000 out of 19,000.
Yeah.
The number yet to be repatriated is less than 1,000. So, what does this tell us? That the vast majority of Ghanaians in South Africa do not want to return home. Clear. Now, why don't they want to return home? There could be one or two or perhaps even three reasons why they don't want to return home. And one of the reasons would be that in spite of the xenophobic attacks, they still feel better in South Africa than in Ghana. One reason. The second reason may well be that the xenophobic attacks have been exaggerated and they don't feel that threatened for them to rush back home. The third reason may be that the xenophobic attacks are serious. Their lives are threatened, but they've so integrated themselves in the South African society that they don't feel able to leave the South African society. These are the three possible reasons. Now, any one of the reasons you take, why the vast majority of Ghanaians in South Africa are not coming back home or are not willing to come back home should tell us that it is utterly reckless to call for retaliation. Completely reckless and misguided to call for retaliation. Let's say that 2,000 of them feel threatened, they want to leave. Call for retaliation. What happens to the 17,000 who should be left there? The 17,000 out of 19,000 who should be left there, what happens to them when we start this senseless warfare? First of all, officially, the number of Ghanaians in South Africa is
Good energy powers the things that people do to empower themselves. It fuels families, communities, businesses. Good energy fuels